I have to say, I was so emotional, I completely neglected to do any introductions. I'm Preeti Sethi. I'm here speaking with Aditi Sethi on behalf of the SoundMind Psychedelic Facilitator Training Program. And I've had the good fortune of working as a birth doula, training as a death doula, and writing and teaching. And I'm here with, of course, Aditi Sethi, the founder and executive director of the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. Aditi, you have, of course, worked as a hospice and palliative care physician and end-of-life doula, and as a musician, and I consider you a sister from another mister. What you just shared, that openness that Ethan expressed, I think is something that so many of us have experienced in engaging with psychedelic supported care. And Ethan was also a psychonaut, and I'm curious if there was anything in that relationship with psychedelics that you think helped him navigate the end of his life.
Yeah, you know, I met Ethan. I hope it was conveyed in the film. I met him 2 weeks before he died, and he had mentioned using psilocybin. He did not use it in the final 2 weeks, mainly because he couldn't swallow safely. So route of administration was a thing. But I did learn along the Ethan journey, as I call it, those 2 weeks were definitely a journey for me, that he had participated in countless ceremonies and rituals in Hawaii and all over the world, and that he had a deep relationship with plant medicine. And all I can tell you, I didn't know him then when he was in those experiences or having those experiences or cultivating a relationship with those medicines. But I can tell you that witnessing his approach to death makes me think that absolutely, makes me actually know absolutely those medicines supported him on his journey and facilitated his sort of deepening understanding of who he is and what he's doing in this body and his relationship to his cancer and his relationship to community, his parents, his family, his friends, and the world. So that's my sense of Ethan's gift, the gifts he received from the medicines.
And I think we sense that in watching the film, and I'm delighted that the research, shows the same, that the data shows that there's a constellation of folks in palliative care that can be supported through psychedelic support, and that, there's data now on hospice workers, on easing bereavement in those who have lost loved ones, as well as those facing end of life and sort of existential fears around that. Is there anything else that you can share in your work about how psychedelics can ease challenges as people approach death?
Yeah. Well, as you stated, the research is showing the multitude of benefits. Again, small studies in some cases around bereavement and things, but you probably all know the research with Tony Bosis at NYU and the Johns Hopkins research. I'm sure you've studied, but just to reiterate or to remind you all, the impact of a single psychedelic journey with psilocybin on existential suffering, which is, in my experience, fairly common in the end of life. Again, why people start to question the purpose and meaning of their lives, or how much they question it when they're diagnosed with a terminal condition, varies based on the individual and their life's journey. But common things that show up are fear of being a burden, fear of death itself, concerns of just sort of demoralization, deep questioning of life and its purpose. Those are pretty common. And I just think I'm losing my train of thought, but the impact of these medicines on individuals is profound. And there are no medications no pharmacological interventions that we can use in palliative care, hospice and palliative care to alleviate existential distress. And so it is profound to me that these studies are showing such benefit.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'd say.
Well, I'm recalling something that you mentioned, Johns Hopkins, Roland Griffith, a researcher who is now passed on, had shared, and a researcher who had done all of, many of the studies on end of life care, and then of course was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer himself. So this really kind of profound, I guess, coming full circle. But he had said that when you make people less afraid to die, they're less likely to cling to life, to aggressively pursue every last medical intervention available. Instead, they become more interested in the quality of their remaining life, as well as the quality of their death. And I'm just curious what comes up for you, because when I watch the film, I think to myself, Ethan had a really good death.
Yeah, I think that's partly what was so transformative for me, is to be a part of his journey, knowing that many people in his condition at his age, but actually any age, anybody who has a deep fear of death and views death as the ultimate failure, will often be caught in this the medical model of dying, where there's futile care and aggressive medical intervention until that last breath. And that is, as somebody who knows the value of death, really, and has experienced these types of deaths, it's very disheartening, and it's can be really challenging to be a part of supporting those and that choosing that path. And so I agree with him, what he says about the fear of death being a driving force in the decisions we make in this setting. Yeah.
You're someone who has been involved in hospice care for decades, right? That very interesting teenager who volunteered in hospice. I love this. What is most misunderstood about death? Like, what do you think needs to be done to foster a more death-aware culture?
Yeah, our modern hospice palliative care movement and model has served many thousands, maybe millions, in its services and offerings. But in the last 100 years, with advancements in modern medicine, the care for those dying has really been entrusted to healthcare professionals. And we have forgotten that this is an innate, this is a human experience, a shared experience, and an experience that we each have the capacity and the inherent wisdom to show up for ourselves and for others. And so in my years of hospice work, I think the misunderstanding or the understanding or the belief that death is a medical event is fundamental to our approach to death collectively in the modern world, I would say. Mm-hmm. And so the shift that I'm seeing with the death doula movement, with conversations like this, and with the psychedelic renaissance, is the remembrance that and the return to death as an inherent sacred relational experience. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. And that death has no value, like in the medical model, and steeped into our training. Dr. Hannah, you may appreciate this too. Death is really the ultimate failure. It's the thing that we are fighting. It's our enemy. It's like we are avoiding it at all costs. And this idea that death has no value. The Lancet, this prominent medical journal, old journal, came out with a 40-page commission paper called The Value of Death, Bringing Death Back into Life. And it looks at death globally, and it's a bigger conversation. But that idea of valuing death, and death not being something we pity and the worst thing that could happen to our loved ones, which it is deep and intense and can be tragic if it's unexpected, and tragic in other ways, but to only focus on that aspect of death, the suffering that comes with it, and not to value the process of dying, I think is a disservice to not only ourselves, but to our loved ones and the generations to come, and perhaps our ancestors, who knows?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm so struck by what you're saying and folding psychedelics into that, because when we do have this conversation often around ego death within psychedelics, and I'm curious to know if you have had any experiences working with people who have, in addition to Ethan, who perhaps can see end of life as like this kind of penultimate altered state, because that, to me, from the outside, that's what it really expresses as an extraordinary, what, like the healer in the elder, the medicine elder said, right? This is like the ultimate release, did he say, or the all healing is release?
Release, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the number of people that experience these without psychedelics in the dying process, but even with, depending, um, these profound visions and these profound insights that people have at their deathbed, on their deathbed, and these comforting experiences that they have, it makes me think, yes, that there is some deep healing happening on many levels of our existence, that medicine only touches the surface of. The medical system isn't even actually touching the surface of much of it. So yes, I feel that to be true. And we know that near death experiences,
Help us touch into that.
yes, yes, to access that same state. I have a dear friend who's in the dying process now, and is a deep meditator, a yogi for his whole life. And he is having psychedelic experiences and able to come back from, when he comes to this physical form, he's very aware of the shift back into the body. And he's describing orbs of light and just powerful mystical experiences he's having. And we know with psychedelic research that people who have those mystical experiences actually have more therapeutic value from the journey. So that mystical piece is really, it's something to look at.
To the point of sort of this intersection of psychedelics and end of life care, I'm curious to know what you think about, for those who want to kind of support people in this way, recognizing that it's still emerging, right? Legalization is an evolving construct at this time, but what do you think is the best course of training for those who want to work with people at end of life and support them with psychedelics?
Yeah, I think there are training programs emerging. EOLPC, I think, is one that I've taken a few courses with. Are you all familiar with that? You can look it up, end of life psychedelic care. So that's emerging. Prati is another one. There are a few that are very focused on end of life care. And it sounds like you all may have an initiative as well with SoundMind. But really, I think reading, say it again.
I said, we'll plant the seed. The SoundMind seed has been planted. Or I think it already was planted, but we'll water it a little. Yeah.
There are legal ways to also directly experience. I mean, there's obviously the underground approach, but there are legal ways to experience ketamine, for example, that are pretty accessible in our community. I don't know if it's true for every community, but I'm in Asheville. We have the Pearl Psychedelic Institute and another organization that's making it very accessible and easy to experience these therapies ourselves. And then they have a lot of training programs for basic holding space for individuals on this journey. So I think that you can experience it directly, read about it, learn about it, study it, and then pursue some of these trainings. I think right now those are the best ways.
Is there anything else that you feel like people should, or you wish that people understood more about end of life, as someone who has worked in this field for so long? And I'm really struck that you named your organization the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. Like, what is it that you recommend people start to turn toward, think about, engage in, to get more familiar with death while they're living?
I love that question. I just did my first TEDx talk, which was like my greatest fear is public speaking, not death. And I spoke to that. And what I distilled it down to is dying before we die, and really paying attention to the small d deaths in our lives in preparation for the big ultimate release. And so looking at how do we navigate the deaths in our lives, the shifts in our relationships, the changes in our careers, and looking at that and really reflecting on it, and using tools like meditation, music, sound, psychedelics, ritual, ceremony to support us as we kind of explore and accept those deaths in our lives. And then the second one was engaging with death, dying, and grief in community, which is really what I'm seeing with the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. It's a nonprofit, and it's volunteer-led, community-supported end-of-life care, but really the nourishment that comes from gathering and preparing to serve at the bedside is what people are really drawn to. So we have a base of now volunteers, I think up to 300 volunteers have come and are so hungry for connection, and this bringing of death awareness into our relations and our communities and our experience of life. I think that's what I'll say about that.
There's such poignancy to centering that awareness as a reminder that we don't have that much time left to love each other in this life, right? Like it has heightened my awareness of the time I have with my mom in such a profound way. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'd like to now open up to questions from the group, and I'm going to invite you, Aditi, if you haven't already seen all the love for you in the chat.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot of love there. If anyone would like to raise their emoji hand or share a question in the chat and help curate that. Yeah, Vanessa is also echoing having a conversation of what does a good death look like is so powerful. And Vanessa Cruz is the one chiming in, and Vanessa is also part of the psychedelic world and the doula world. Vanessa, do you want to unmute and share anything else? I can't hear you. It looks like you're unmuted, but I don't hear you.
You can hear me, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for bringing me on. Yeah. I've been in death doula for about 20 years and do work in the psychedelic field. And this video is just, I'm just so grateful that this is something that's available for people to witness, because it's something that has always been really private or just in a home or in a facility, and not a lot of people get to see what the actual death process looks like and how intense but beautiful that it can be. And so it's just really, thank you, Dr. Sethi, for creating this and providing it to viewers to understand that, you know, there you can come together in community, that we die in community, and that you can have a good death. And simply, like I said in the comments, having a conversation about like, what do I want? What do you want? Asking that question, what does a good death look like? And the fact that you give people option, you know, and choice, and that they can say, wow, I never thought of that. I can actually have a good death, and you know, the idea starts to grow, and beautiful things come out of that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and witness this.
Thank you. I have to say, thank you, Vanessa. Credit goes to Scott Kirschenbaum, the director, and Prerna and Landon, the team that has really captured the journey and helped it be shared in the world. I was just doing my thing, like, you know, like you would probably do for anybody that you serve. So thank you. And it's interesting, the term good death is something that I don't think I use as much anymore. I think I tend to think of what is the death that will reflect your values and your life. And because, like you say, a death is unique for each person, and what I think is good may not be. Like, some people may not want that level of ritual and ceremony, and community support death care may be too much for people. I think that's a good death, but so it's an interesting conversation to have around what that means for each one of us individually.
There's a question from Sandy in the chat asking, can you clarify why Ethan left the original hospice center?
Yeah, so when I heard about Ethan, a friend of mine had been watching his live streams, and he had come down from Brooklyn, where his mother was living, to Charlotte, where his father was living, and caring for him in the home was becoming too much for his elder parents. So he ended up in an inpatient hospice facility in Charlotte. And there he put out, into the universe, I'm dying. I want to die in community, but I really can't rally my community. They were in Hawaii and all over the country, and it was during the pandemic. And I want to film my dying process. So my dear friend, soul brother Jojo, heard that call, had been following his streams, and called me, the hospice doc in Asheville, which is 2 hours away, and the community organizer, and our friend Scott Kirschenbaum, the director. And so he left Charlotte to come to Asheville, really to be around community. And he came from, it's much easier to transfer facility to facility than facility to home. And he actually didn't have a home at that moment. So he came to our facility where I worked for 10 years and deeply loved my career and job there. However, they wouldn't let us film in that facility. Last minute, they changed their mind. It's a big for-profit hospice now. It used to be a small nonprofit. Bought out by a big hospital system, and they were concerned about something negative leaking about hospice, something that wouldn't be favorable. And that fear was enough to keep them from honoring a dying man's wish, and that's where things shifted. And actually the call at the beginning of the film where I'm weeping was the day after he arrived to the center, the hospice facility, and I didn't have any hope of getting him anywhere. Or having, so I was really emotional and that's where I reached out to those two souls, and everything moved quickly after that. So, yeah.
Amazing what happens when you ask, right? That's incredible. Lawrence has his hand raised. Hi, Lawrence.
Did Ethan have any out-of-body experience? I know a number in my family, people who said they were going through a tunnel and they came back, and this happened multiple times before they finally passed on.
He didn't express it in the 2 weeks I knew him. He didn't express any visions like that or any kind of experience of that nature. But yeah, it is very common to see a tunnel, to see a bright light, to see loved ones that have gone before. Thank you for that, Lawrence.
How did those 2 weeks change you?
Oh, changed my whole life. Gosh, thank you for that question. Goodness. In those 2 weeks, it was a moment that after a whole day on that Friday that he came to Asheville, I was on call with risk management, legal, PR, everybody you can imagine that would have an impact on the decision to film in a facility, a hospice facility. We had 5 or 6 meetings that day. And the minute at 6 o'clock, when he was literally rolling in at 6:05 in an ambulance, we got the VP of the company said, absolutely not. What is it? Red light. Anyway, there's a word that they used. It's a no-go. And at that moment, my whole being just everything just stopped. I can't even describe it more than that. It was this moment of oh, I can't really, well, first of all, we have not done much to shift our cultural perspective around death in our medical system for as long as I've been doing this work, which is 20 plus years. And so I realized then that there's no incentive to get creative and create art to help people with their fear of death. There's no incentive in the medical system. So that moment shifted everything for me in terms of my relationship to the medical model. And I haven't thought about it in that way in a while, and I had never asked for anything in my 10 years of being there. And it felt like, who am I giving my love and devotion to? And yes, I get a fat paycheck and I'm comfortable and I work 4 days a week and have a great balance, work-life balance, which I don't have now yet. but it shifted everything. So that moment on, I feel like I entered, honestly, a mystical experience for 2 weeks. I was in an altered state. I felt guided. The whole journey with Ethan was guided. I knew where to go, what to do, who to call, how to just deal with some of the family conflict that was happening, the interpersonal conflict. You had all these volunteers or like communities that had never worked together come together. That's a lot of human beings, a lot of personalities. And I was managing it, and I was not quiet and shy about it. And I was speaking differently. I was altered. So, and that has continued to this day. So I put my notice in right after he died without a plan, which is not like me. You know, to get through med school and medicine, you have to be very linear in your thinking and approach. And I just surrendered, and that has continued. And that has led to all of this, really. It's emergence of CCLD and all the rest of it. So thank you for that question.
Incredible. There are a couple more questions. Adina, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, has her hand raised. Hi.
Yes. Hi there. That's a perfect pronunciation. Thank you. So yes, thank you so much for filming this. That was amazing. I am very interested in becoming a death doula myself when I'm newly licensed.
Oh, did we lose you?
Dina is frozen. All right, I'm going to sneak in one of the chat questions while Adina is frozen, which is, and then Meryl, I see your question too, but from Luke, how did you get 2 weeks off to be with Ethan? But I guess you gave your notice, so maybe that.
No, I gave it to him after, and I had to give it 3 months. I had to work 3 months after I gave my notice. So for one of those weeks, I asked for some help because a lot of our docs had left once the big for-profit hospital system bought the center. I mean, the hospice facility, a lot of docs left. So there weren't many of us, but I found one that happened to be available to cover my turns, my shifts. And then the next week, I just went in. I mean, I kind of was like, I get to do what I want. It was a shift. I mean, I've been a rule follower. I gave 110%, and I just gave 80%. And I went in and I did my work and I left. I was like, I'm out of here. I couldn't be there beyond serving. I couldn't just do paperwork and fill out the forms anymore. I couldn't do it. And so I just made it work somehow magically. Spirit helped.
There was another death there. There was a death of a version of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Meryl asks in the chat, she's mentioning she wrote an article for the Washington Post recently on a Canadian program offering terminal patients a psychedelic experience done in a group. It's an awesome article because Meryl and I were fellows together through the Berkeley Journalism Fellowship. Do you have any thoughts of community versus individual psychedelic experiences for people who are dying? And thank you for a wonderful film.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for your work. You know, I think people who are really on that threshold of nearing their actual death, physical death, I don't know how comfortable I would be, and people that I know would be exploring using a psychedelic in a group setting when there's so much uncertainty about how they're really going to be. And how they're going, and maybe if they're doing it in a group of people they trust and they feel safe with, maybe that would shift it. But I would imagine a one-on-one journey would feel safer and more like a safer container. But I don't know. It's a beautiful question. I guess you could look at group therapy in general and see how it works. And I don't know enough about group therapy, to be honest.
I think that Sunstone Therapies in DC or outside of Washington, DC is working with terminal cancer patients and doing group work together with them and also working with psilocybin. So that might be a great place to explore. Kathy and then Adina, and then I'm going to turn it over to our fearless leader, Hannah, to close out.
Yes, thank you. Aditi, thank you. This has been I don't know. Amazing. My question, and you mentioned it a couple times, I'm an end-of-life doula, and talking about the medical model and the cultural shift that is beginning to take place around relationship to death and dying. My question to you is, obviously, at this point, the medical model is not going to participate in the cultural shift. So what is going to be the strength, the pull behind this? If I think in the next 10 years, if I can ask it that way, the next 5 years, the next 3 years, what's happening?
I think the shift is happening with individuals first, with each one of us, and how we will advocate for those we love just by having these conversations. It's more than many people have done in their lifetime. And so I think these conversations are happening more and more in the psychedelic communities and in the death doula communities and then beyond. So I think it starts with each one of us and then collectively in our communities. That's what we're seeing here in Asheville, like even just having a space to have these conversations and engage with death and show up for people who are dying, that is shifting our local community. And actually, I get the strong sense that we're meant to be a bridge. So I separate the medical model from I'm still part of it, actually. I'm part-time doctoring. And anytime so hospice in our model, hospice comes in and provides all the medical care in this home environment for our residents who are dying. Just like in Ethan's situation, hospice came in. As you notice, I said the hospice nurse will come.
Yeah.
I wasn't a doctor in that setting. So the hospice providers are coming into our home, the sanctuary, and providing the medical care and witnessing and feeling the energetics and the what we're creating, and that's shifting them. I can't tell you how many nurses have said, I can't wait to volunteer for you all when I have more time. And so as that happens, and I was on the hospital floor the other day evaluating a possible resident, and the nurses were all like, they had just looked at our website knowing that I was coming, and they were blown away. And so it's happening just individually. And then the more we advocate, the more we speak up, potentially things can shift. That's my
Yeah.
intention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Adina, we lost you there.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I just moved to Seattle like 2 days ago and my hotspot died right as I was asking a question. So that wasn't the best timing. But thank you for having me back for just a moment. I was going to ask kind of a heavy question and then my internet cut out, but I was wondering if Ethan had said anything else besides the one sentence that we heard in the video about his relationship to the process of dying and then psychedelics experiences. Did he talk any more in detail about that at all to you? Do you remember?
Yeah, not with me. I mean, I think he snuck some medicine, magic mushrooms, the psilocybin, into the facility in Charlotte, and I think he was using it, and it was very helpful for him. That's what I gathered when I first talked to him. But no, we didn't have much time to talk about his relationship to it, other than the things that were captured on the film. He continued to use Rick Simpson oil, which is a very concentrated THC formulation. So that was the green on his teeth. So he continued to have that relationship, and that was just like a thick viscous thing that he could put on his tooth and get absorbed that way. So yeah, I know he benefited greatly from it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And PK, I'm going to go ahead and answer your question, if that's okay, that there are going to be additional screenings. And I can share on the SoundMind Slack, but also Last Ecstatic Days, I think .com is the place to go to find out about future screenings. I want to just thank you so much, but I want to thank the filmmakers. I want to thank you, Aditi, and Ethan for his courage, and also just extreme gratitude to Hannah McLean, the founder of SoundMind, and just a spirit in the world who knows the value of conversations like this. So Hannah, before we wrap, I just wanted to turn to you to hear your thoughts about the film and to close us out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to be a participant and have other people host. I'm getting used to this back here. I love the film. It was wonderful, very moving. It just it brought me back to my medical school days of just how many people I assisted die in a way that I think could have been better. You know, you can be as present as possible, but you do kind of watch the chaos of everyone trying to save a person, even if the person says they're ready to go, and it's very against what all the medical model is looking to do. So really made me excited about what is in store for this all the folks in this space. And thank you, Aditi and Ethan and Preeti and all the spirits of this, and Scott, he's wonderful, spirits of this film. Super grateful. My grandfather died of glioblastoma, and also one of a patient that really moved me. So I thought a lot about that. And actually that one patient, it was a speech pathology master's student, and my supervisor told me to have him write a letter to his family when he still could, so that when he couldn't anymore, they could see what his words were before he started getting confused. And I thought that was a really depressing activity, but I did it with him. And then he got more and more confused. And oftentimes in GBM, you can get aggressive too, like just like paranoid aggressive. And that letter came in very handy. I think about him a lot. And I also think about my dad that wasn't able to see his dad die. And a lot of his frustration comes from not being invited back to see his father die when he was in high school, but having experienced what GBM deaths look like, sometimes it's very difficult. And just really honoring my grandmother for making that choice for her sons. That sometimes it's not a good death, and sometimes it's not something you'd want your kids to see. So just really like having the gratitude for the all of the efforts that are going into making dying more what a person wants. And also just the songs and the music really brought me back to my trips through Varanasi, and thinking when I was 18, I backpacked through Asia, and just thinking as an 18-year-old, seeing a whole city of people that had decided to die together. I mean, it's not the whole city, but it's a lot of people go there, and that's the most holy place to die. And I was like, wow, this is really different than anything I've ever seen. A like peaceful choice of not trying to save everyone, but like dying together in community, and just really honoring that. So so much gratitude. And we do have an initiative. It's not just an idea, but it's very interesting. It's bringing the psychedelics together with the palliative care folks. It's exactly what you're seeing, is that the palliative care folks are interested, but they can't really do the things that they want to do in the clinics, because the clinics are in this medical model, and then people outside the medical model are like, I'm really interested in talking to the doctors who are doing it, and the doctors who want to be doing it can't really do it. So it's and then death doulas are like, I'm here. So a lot of it is just like having these conversations, and I think we keep having them, and we keep working together to find where are the places we can have them, and the places that we can do this kind of work. And yeah, very excited to continue on this path with you all. And again, so good to see so many familiar faces in the audience. That's what I got. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you again, Aditi, for your time and your care and your love and your wisdom. Yeah, wishing you all a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thank you.
Mm.